Hello, I am Nathan Lim here today with a team at the Haven Community. You're listening to our podcast, The Haven Community Inside the Teenage Mind, and in today's episode, we're going to continue our discussion on the Black Lives Matter movement in response to everything happening in the moment, and how it can see society and how it can continue to hope for a future that eliminates racism. If you haven't listened to part one of our discussion, please make sure to do so. To start off our discussion, I wanted to emphasize that the Haven community stands in solidarity with the Black community and all of those who joined forces to support the Black Lives Matter movement. In this time, we need to continue to stand for justice to all of the beautiful lives lost. We need to have hope and strength in believing and spreading the message that systemic racism and unjust inequality will end. We hope that all of our listeners will be able to fight for change, even if it is as small as signing a petition. We have outlined a statement on behalf of our administration to the general public to help promote ways in which people can understand our initiative and seek ways to support the Black Lives Matter movement. You can check this out at thehavencommunity.net/newsroom. As teenagers, we've seen a lot unfold in our society and how work needs to be done to continue building up a community that promotes equality and justice. In light of the recent events, with the explosion of growth in the Black Lives Matter movement, the question I want to ask is, what have we seen about our society?
Well, to start off, this shows that the Black Lives Matter movement was long due to come. George Floyd was able to once again spark and ignite the movement in full blast. And with him and the news coverage he got, with more and more people being aware of the prejudiced ways of our society and how bad it really was and how it has been, and people being able to keep an eye out of other acts of hate during this time and all of the prejudiced ways of our society and how and people are able to be more aware that when it really comes to our society, like many others, it has its flaws. And everyone knows that. However, not everyone does something to try to fix those issues. And we see that many of those issues are thrown under the carpet and turned a blind eye to, such as this movement for the longest time. And I think that with the explosion and growth of this movement, more and more people are able to see the injustices they have tried unintentionally or intentionally to avoid and not educate themselves on, which is very dangerous, especially in this time period. And right now, more and more people are seeing the inequalities ingrained in our society and how it's hurting a large majority of the people that are around us that we know and that we care about. That's very dangerous, and I feel like more people should be educated on this topic.
I agree, and I want to say that looking at recent events and like the vast growth of the movement, I guess we saw that. I guess it showed us how we stand as a community, like across the country. We witnessed our society come together in a time that we needed to fight for what we believed was right, that Black Lives Matter. And honestly, that was a very beautiful thing to see because we saw people of all races come together in unity, and it showed that there's a lot of love in this world, even with all the hatred and racism that there is. And the people do know the difference between right and wrong.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in addition to like love and like everything that was said, it also shows how people can come together and eliminate this discriminatory system. It's quite amazing how like many of the minority groups are pitching in by either donating or going to the protests. Although many races face like a different aspect of racism, they understand how it feels to be undermined. Many also know that the Black people have gone through the most as this discrimination has been alive since the beginning of time. The coming together of these minority groups and all the people in general is quite heartwarming, and it's honestly humane.
Yeah, exactly. Like with the amount of old cases popping up everywhere and how many people have had to suffer because of this like corrupt system, this movement should have happened a long, long time ago. I am honestly so happy that George Floyd's death finally sparked this movement. It really showed me like how many people care about each other and that are like willing to fight for it. It was so wholesome and beautiful to look at, but it also showed the surprisingly large amount of people who don't support this. like not only in my friend circle, but so many people would comment on like BLM posts on social media saying some of the most terrible things I've heard. Like one of them said, this would have never happened if we continued to keep them as our slaves. Or some people would post pictures with their knees on their friends' necks as if this was a challenge. I was so confused on whether these people like didn't have a brain or a heart. Like this whole thing shows the amazing amount of humanity people have, but it also shows the disgusting amount of like strong racism and prejudice still present in our society.
And yeah, on account of like racism and prejudice still being like present in our society, I think this movement has shown that much of our society is still inherently racist, whether they're aware of it or not. Like, many people were raised on traditional beliefs that are very racist in nature, and it's hard for them to understand what Black Lives Matter really means. Like, for example, I've seen a lot of people argue that all lives matter, which defeats the purpose of Black Lives Matter. And so this movement is not saying that other lives don't matter. It's about bringing attention to the disparity that the Black community has faced for centuries, and in all aspects of life, like education, so that they can receive the help and need they deserve.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think that the explosion of this movement truly shows how passionate we can be when showing support for our fellow Americans. Like, even though COVID-19 is still a huge issue, many people going to protest have risked their health in order to show their support. And even teenagers like us have gone out to protest and are spreading awareness by sharing posts on Instagram and also retweeting important information. It's amazing to see how so many people of different backgrounds have come together in order to further this movement and show their support.
Agreeing with everyone else, I've actually seen posts relating to this on Instagram. It said it's everyone versus the racist, which is completely true. We see how many people from different backgrounds support the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it was protesting, reposting powerful pictures on social media, or just donating. It shows that we're all together in this to fight against the police brutality and the racists of the world. Thousands of us see and feel for our Black brothers and sisters and show this through our constant support and empowerment in these influential Black Lives Matter movements.
Yeah, so like when looking at the news and seeing the explosion and growth of this movement, honestly, makes me so happy and fills my heart with joy because it portrays how in unity we fight for what is right and bring justice to those families who have lost like a member due to police brutality. Also how like not only are we fighting for Black lives, but like all people of color, which brings me, like I said, so much joy because I myself am a person of color and have experienced discrimination. So like the fact that everyone, you know, practically the whole world is coming together as one is just outstanding.
Yeah, when I first noticed like the posts about the protests going on, I guess you could say I was happy. Well, I was happy because I don't know about you guys, but when I did see the disturbing video of George Floyd's death, I was so furious at the fact that someone like those policemen who are supposed to protect us were the one who were conducting the disgusting crime and not even second guessing themselves. But like at the same time, during the video, you could see that there were people who were standing up for him when he couldn't. So I knew that if everyone came together to address this issue of racial misconduct and even the past issues the Black community had faced, that it wasn't going to be something that flew above our heads, because anyone can see that this tragedy actually brought a nation together. Of course, there was going to be like some people who would disagree, and I still don't get that to this day. But honestly, the people who do agree with this movement outweigh them 100 times more. And I just think it's so beautiful that people can come together as one just to fight for one purpose, and it's to change the Black lives as they need.
I completely agree, and I think that seeing society come together to support a movement that is beautiful and important, like this one, is highly significant. People coming together to fight and showing that Black Lives Matter is something that everyone should find ways to do. Which brings me to my next question, in which we ask how can we, as teenagers and youth, use our voices and platforms to support this movement, and what steps can we take?
Honestly, as cliche as it may sound, youth truly is our future, the future. And when I think about it, we can use our voices and what we believe is right in order to educate others on it. We can use our voices to do this, and together we can make it even louder. And by doing so, we can tell others and enlighten them on the injustices that have happened yesterday, are happening today, that are still happening at every moment, and that have been happening for the longest time. And right now, it's important that we are able to use our social platforms to share relevant and accurate information with others. And we also use like attend protests if we have time, if we choose to. And along the way, also research ways in order to stay safe and protected. And it is important to understand that together as one, our voices can be heard, and those voices have the ability to be echoed on the walls of the dark room of ignorance that our society, as it seems right now, has subdued itself to regarding the inequalities and injustices of Black men and women, children and elderly. And especially now, we can join together hands in hand. Some may say that we can't. We're too naive, we're too young, we don't understand. But it's just because of that, because we're young, that we have this voice and we have these platforms that we're able to express ourselves on, that we can be part of this movement and we can make a difference. We can educate ourselves and make our voices heard. We can help those who need it and take a stand for them, which is very important.
I agree. Our voices as teens are very important. We are basically the future. We are able to educate many people by using our voices and platforms to induce change that is long, long overdue. Our activism goes long ways in influencing others for change. Attending protests would be awesome, and I have seen many of my wonderful friends take part in it, but I know that some parents will not allow us to do that. So as teens, we have many other options too. We can post or repost on social media about news, videos, or anything to help the cause out, to keep it alive and relevant in the media. We can also donate, though I know everyone is under certain circumstances to where they're unable to donate, but there are actually YouTube videos out there that donate all the revenue they receive from that video to the funds that support Black Lives Matter movements. These YouTube videos talk about Black culture, like their music, heritage, styles, traditions, and much more, as well as implementing ads into these videos so that more revenue is generated. I know a YouTuber called Zoe Amira posted a video like this, and it is almost an hour long, so everyone was able to donate money by just watching. However, I recently found out that I think it was taken down, I believe, but there are many other videos or live streams that you can watch that do the same thing, that generate money to donate. Personally, I've donated as much as I can to the Black Lives Matter funds. So just remember, there are always many ways that you can help out.
Like previously said, I think the youth can help out this movement by spreading awareness of the importance of it and why it's necessary on social media platforms like Instagram. It's been like a popular way to inform people about the specific aspects of Black Lives Matter, such as explaining like systemic racism and how it affects people. And though it's hard, I feel we can also educate our family members who may be racist and explain to them why we have to move away from these ideologies that place emphasis on racism and separating people into groups by race. And I feel like we should also explain to them about about the Black Lives Matter movement and why it's so important for the Black community to gain the rights they deserve, as they may misinterpret what they see on mainstream media.
I agree. We need to set it straight and fight the hardest to ensure that we stop racism now with our generation. Social media is wonderful that we can really voice the importance of the Black Lives Matter movement through post reshares and stories. And further, I think it's important we extend this conversation to our friends and family. It's a difficult discussion, but it's something that we need to take because we need to learn how to have these conversations. And our parents, aunts, uncles, we all need to realize that stereotypes like these set upon the Black community and any other racial stereotype that is said is invalid. As youth, we need to overcome this fear that we're not going to make a difference, because instead we need to actually believe that we can do something.
I completely agree with that. I think that the youth is already doing a great job by reposting and sharing posts regarding the Black Lives Matter movement. I really think that it's important to bring up Black Lives Matter and being aware of what is happening around us into our daily conversations to become more informed with the world. I know that I have conversations with my friends about the Black Lives Matter movement and what we can do to support it on a regular basis. Informing your siblings or other family members can do a lot in terms of spreading awareness and is a great way to help the movement. Of course, other ways to directly support the movement would be to protest and donate. However, many of us may be unable to do these things, so spreading awareness and showing support for the movement also goes a long way.
I totally agree with everyone. As youth, we need to realize that we are the future and our voices matter too. There are a lot of opportunities we can find in helping this movement gain its prominence, and it's important we do this fearlessly and continually. Finally, I want to ask everyone if they believe there is a way in which we can end systemic racism.
Well, it's been an issue since the beginning of history. Racism is just one of the many things our world struggles with, and it's heart-wrenching. I don't think there could be anything that we could have done to prevent this thing from happening in the future, because at the end of the day, our world, we don't live in a perfect world. We are all different. We don't think, act, or look the same. And so the only thing I could think of is that we could have probably spread more awareness before waiting so long. But regardless, it would have just happened. Because for me, I think that when I think of this whole situation, I think of like that challenge with the watermelons and the rubber bands, where if you place if you place a lot of rubber bands to the watermelon, eventually it's going to explode. So I just think of it as the case where the racial issues are the rubber bands, and it was just a matter of time till the whole world explodes, not literally, but like people will have enough of it. And I just thought of it. Yeah.
Yeah, in addition to that, I genuinely think that these events are those that cannot be predicted in a sense. Racism has been alive for a long time, even after the founding fathers thought they did something. But it was finally recorded and shown to the world. The revolution we are currently in will hopefully bring light to a new day. But honestly, with people who are stubborn and quite honestly don't know what they're talking about, it's hard to change their mindset. I believe that finally bringing light to the situation is amazing as it allows for greater awareness, but I'm not sure if there is a possible way to potentially prevent this as many are stubborn.
Yeah, exactly. Like racism will always be an issue. Like it was an issue then and it's an issue now. Like it sucks, but it's like sadly the truth. Like I hate knowing that the fact that I'm always being discriminated against for the color of my skin. Like since I was a little kid, racism has always been an issue, especially for my parents who had barely come to this country without knowing any English. Like looking at how the world has come makes me fear for future generations. However, I do hope that with this movement, a change will be made that will last forever. Like it is very hard to prevent something like this in the future, but I believe that it is important to start with the law enforcement. It's important that those who are going into the field with hope of making a difference understand and know how to properly treat others, no matter the color of their skin. It's like important to understand that we are all equal, and most importantly, it's important that children learn that when something isn't right, fight. Like fight for justice and do the right thing.
I truly agree. I think that people are taught to be racist. I think we have to realize that the color of our skin and our origins do not blur the fact that we are all human and we are all the same. I can't say for sure if there is a way to prevent this systemic racism and inequality. It would be awesome if we could just get like a magic wand and erase racism. But however, history has shown that racism sticks, and even to this day, we've seen that it sticks. But I want to encourage that we should find hope and fight until the end. We really need to use our voices now more than ever, and we need to learn how to stick up for one another and defeat racism. Whatever it may be, we need to really teach everyone that racism and these kinds of inequalities and hate crimes has no place, and it will never have a place. Education is significant, and I hope that all of us can realize that we need to learn our voices and continue to fight against racism.
Exactly. I totally agree with everyone. I'm usually like super optimistic, but I don't think racism is ever just going to disappear. I mean, our country's whole foundation was literally built on racism. I don't think I need to remind anyone of how exactly this country started, but a world without racism is a world filled with humanity, and unfortunately that world is too perfect. And we know that a utopia is really just a dystopia in disguise. But I do believe that we can lower the amount of racism present in our society. Piggybacking off of the quote, racism isn't born, it's taught. We can start by teaching our future generation. Teach your kids that the color of someone's skin shouldn't matter because they aren't any different from you. Teach people how you want to be, or treat people how you want to be treated, but that goes for all skin colors. There are also kids in our own generation and people older who believe racism is good. They'll teach their kids the same thing. That's where we all come in, and we have to guide them towards what's right.
And that's the hope for the future from this movement, that no one will have to go through this again. We want a society for the coming generations that doesn't simply accept and normalize this internalized racism and the death of the innocent by the unpunished hands of someone in authority.
Agreed. This movement is shining light and emphasizing that there needs to be an end to systemic racism, and we need to continue to have this hope and mindset. We need to build hope, and we need to educate, and we just need to be kind. Society is a place for all of us to build together, and it's something we need to fight for. Equality, justice, all these things, this is what we're fighting for in our society, and I hope that we can realize that we need to fight for these things as much as we possibly can. Thank you for listening to the second part of our Black Lives Matter series in our podcast, The Haven Community Inside the Teenage Mind. Be sure to check us out on the web at www.thehavencommunity.net. You can always contact us at contact@thehavencommunity.net or by checking us out on Instagram at haven_community. In our next episode, we'll be going back to our podcast initiative in which we seek into the teenage mind and unfold the fears of growing up and the challenges we may face.